Just a few short weeks ago, we found out that an AI company, one of the most popular on the planet, had built a model that they said was too dangerous to release. Because of that, they created a group of the biggest tech companies on the planet, and they gave them each 90 days to use this new model to patch their systems before the rest of us find out what's broken. Supposedly, this new model is sitting on thousands of unpatched 0 days. Every single major OS is vulnerable, every major browser. Probably many more pieces of software that we're not even aware of. We're all on lean IT teams, whether we work for a co-op, a local government, or another small or medium business. And tonight, this story that we're going to share with you should matter a lot. We're going to be downstream of every decision that comes out of this project. So what we're going to do today is walk you through what happened, what's coming later this summer, and what we should be doing right now to prepare. This is Off the Wire. So thank you to everyone for joining us again. This is Anthony and and we're here for another episode of Off the Wire. Anthony, I think I might have been a little too cold with that cold open. A little terrifying there. I don't know what you're thinking, but we're going to see how this episode goes.
Yeah, Tanner, I've heard a few things in the news. Really, I thought this would be something a little bit bigger in the media, but the things that I hear is a lot of clickbaity items, especially where it says hackers have already got access, and we're going to elaborate on that story. But I think it'd be good for us to kind of cover this and really go into the details and talk about what actually happened and really what we can do to prepare for it.
So Anthony, we were a little mysterious in that cold open, but what we're talking about tonight and what we're going to go through is this Mythos model by Anthropic. What's really Mythos Preview, and this is what they call kind of a frontier model from Anthropic. It's one of their brand new models. It was announced on April 7th, so just a few short weeks ago. And one kind of key thing to differentiate this model is that it's not a security plugin on an additional model. This is a new general purpose model that they have been working on. And this general purpose model happens to be extremely good at security, at exploitation, and at finding brand new and novel bugs. So we kind of alluded to a lot, Anthony, but when they came out with this article and this publication of it, they really narrowed it down to a few bugs that they had found. Now they alluded to a lot more, but there was a few that they kind of brought light to and shared a lot of detail in. Can you walk everyone through some of the ones that they found and kind of the surprises as we went through and looked at these?
I'll give you a few examples, and the first two really kind of caught me off guard. And I thought maybe this was trying to be a big push in the media to basically make them look like they've got the best model out there. But these were actually real 0 days, and the top two that come to mind one was with FreeBSD. It was a network file share vulnerability that was over 17 years old,
Oh,
and it's also authenticated remote code execution for that. There was another one with OpenBSD for integer overflow. That one was 27 years old. So it's not just finding like current stuff, like it's finding things that are out there, been out there for decades, which is kind of crazy. It also found another one with the Linux kernel where it could give it basically root access. And it's got thousands more. And these aren't just Linux vulnerabilities; they're with the browsers, whether it be Firefox and Chrome. Like we need any more Chrome vulnerabilities, but it's finding thousands of those out there.
yeah, I noticed, Anthony, they didn't have any Windows vulnerabilities they talked about. No, I'm just kidding. But I mean, isn't that wild? Is that wild to you? I guess it was just kind of shocking to me that we've had some of these OSs for, over a decade or over 2 decades with
Yeah.
all these other scanners. And I mean, even I know you and I have at least taken a look at like some of these AI supposed scanners and all this stuff, and just nothing has found this, not even a human in that time frame. But I don't know, it seemed very wild to me.
Yeah, I think the first several times I was really just kind of pushing off to the side thinking they're over exaggerating, but the more and more that comes out about this, they're not exaggerating.
Yeah. So pretty bold claims. And it's kind of hard to refute some of those claims, right? Because basically, right now, there's only about 50 companies or a little right around the 50 mark that have access to this. And so Anthropic, they created this project Glasswing, and basically it includes all the large software manufacturers that you would think of, and they basically have access to this. And we're going to talk a little bit about how long and what's going to come of that later. But they have access to this. No one else has access. So it's hard to refute that. But we did want to make sure we were trying to kind of providing both sides of it. So took a look at, there was another security company, and we took a look. They're called Isle, and what they did is once those vulnerabilities were released, they actually went and found some of the open weight, cheaper models, and they tried to replicate the results. Now they're testing everybody, every test you have has some sort of bias in it, but they were able to, with providing the code to these open weight models, they were able to get several of them to identify the similar bugs. So the good thing about that is it's kind of good and bad. Obviously, Mythos is kind of pushing the envelope, but we may be able to, we may have some of the tool sets to even figure this out already. It's just Mythos has been able to kind of take it from finding to exploitation, whereas the other models are really just trying to figure out if is there an issue with it. So in their testing, 8 of the 8 models detected that FreeBSD, a network file share overflow. So that's good. There was an actually just a 5B parameter open weight model that was able to do the OpenBSD. So some good things there, because any of these models, and this is going to be a flagship model for Anthropic, it's going to be huge. It's going to be costly to run. While that's good and kind of completeness of thought, we are coming, I think, and I don't want to kind of get your thought. I think we are coming into a reality where efficiency is going to play a bigger role in AI models. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I guess just to give people perspective that aren't too super knowledgeable, but like a 5 billion parameter model, that's something that you could run on a pretty decent laptop. That doesn't take, a big GPU to do that. But yeah, as these models get released, we're seeing where they're being more efficient, and don't need quite the VRAM. Now, don't get me wrong, like they're still building these huge models that take a lot of VRAM, but the capabilities of these smaller ones, I don't know what time frame it'll be, but we'll eventually see, yeah, they're going to have these big cloud based models that people can't run on local hardware, but we're going to see more and more stuff get pushed to the edge and running, whether it be like a Raspberry Pi, which some people have stuff running Raspberry Pis now, but I think it'll be more commonplace, and you'll see much more capable models that can run in devices themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I see a real hybrid at some point with lower cost local models, maybe taking care of the basic stuff within kind of handing it off to larger models. As if you think of it a little bit, kind of how we're seeing now, where it's like there's usually multi-model, and if it's needs more thinking, it's kind of passing it off to other models and various things. So I definitely see that, because the reality is hitting us a little bit there. So how did we even know about Mythos? If we talked about they haven't released it yet, right? Well, actually, it got scooped. It wasn't even Anthropic that actually released it. There was 2 weeks before they were supposed to launch it. They basically, there was a publicly searchable data store that had basically documents on it, internal imaging, some, I think there was some documentation on results and various other things. And basically, they were able to get access to this ahead of time. So it is sometimes ironic there. So it was originally codenamed, and I hope I'm saying this right, Capybara. But anyway, obviously, I think Mythos is a little easier to say, so I'm glad they went with that. So anyway, it got leaked. Then, of course, they had to confirm it, and that's when really Project Glasswing kind of was announced. I don't know if they were planning Project Glasswing or if the leak prompted them to do that. But anyway, the interesting thing is there was actually like a second leak. So after the first leak that we knew about it, created Project Glasswing, that these 50 companies have access to this for 90 days. And we're going to talk about the details of that. Then there was a Discord group of 4 people. One of them had contractor access to some of the Claude models. And they basically, just by a hunch of how they might name it, they actually guessed the URL. And so, believe it or not, the model was actually live and available to access if you had the right credentials. And they just guessed the URL, and they were able to get access to the model with those contractor credentials. So
Tanner, didn't we just talk about third-party access,
Yeah,
vendor
we did.
access?
I think we did talk about that. Pretty interesting. Very ironic there. But I think it's ironic that they kind of came out with this. This is too scary to release. This is going to change the world. And yet they didn't even lock it down other than a URL change, which,
Yeah.
oh man, sometimes it's kind of funny. I feel like sometimes these AI companies are kind of like the person who basically could describe the theory of relativity to you, but couldn't change the oil in their car. You know,
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes it's like they think at like a such a higher level that they like forget some of the basic stuff. But anyway, kind of interesting how it rolled out. So Anthony, I think you're going to talk a little bit about Glasswing, a little bit about who's in it and how, and some of the results, really the early results of Project Glasswing.
So April 7th, Anthropic gave access to 50 vendors, and not all of them were named. Those that were named were Amazon or AWS, Apple, Google, Microsoft. That's why there wasn't any Microsoft findings in there. Cisco, CrowdStrike, NVIDIA, Palo Alto, Broadcom, and the Linux Foundation. And so in addition, there was 40 more that they didn't even name. They gave them all access to the system, and then they gave them $100 million in credits so they could run the system with all those credits. And they also, this is something I'm very glad to see that they did, is they gave 4 million to open source security groups for like Linux and stuff like that. Like they don't have dedicated teams. They got people basically just volunteering, and gave them $4 million to help them work on their vulnerabilities that they find. So, all those companies, they're going to have access to that, and they're going to basically have some time to identify their vulnerabilities and patch them. But there's a 90-day deadline, and we don't know exactly when that clock started, but we can kind of estimate that it started around April 7th. But after 90 days is when this potentially may go public. I have a hard time believing that they're just going to let this go if it's that big of an issue. And I don't really know how they would handle it, because I understand not you can't just give it out to every company, because if you did, then it would 100% be leaked to bad actors. So I think they're kind of doing the best of what they can considering the
Mhm.
situation. But with these groups, there's actually a success story, and that they're actually doing what they need to do. So one is with Mozilla. So Mythos actually found 271 vulnerabilities with Firefox, and before Firefox release 150 came out, they actually patched all 271 of those vulnerabilities. So that's an ideal situation. That is a vendor doing what they need to do. But for Anthropic, that was only 1% of the vulnerabilities that are patched. So yes, they did what they needed to do. Will Microsoft, will Cisco, will they do what they need to do? And on top of that, like there's the thousands of hundreds of thousands of vendors out there that aren't going to have access to that. And yes, we use a lot of, big box companies such as these, but we've got way more smaller companies than these as
Mhm.
well.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting on how they handled it. I know there's some, just like there's anything, there's some spin in there, but if it is kind of like they say, and I don't know, it's probably maybe a smidge better than what they say, and it's probably not. It's way worse than what we think. I think maybe that's where it lands. We'll see, but I think they are doing kind of the best they could. To your point, if everybody got hands on this, like it would get leaked out. There's just no doubt. I mean, and I don't even know the 50 companies. It might be very tight on actually who in those companies has access. It may just be a few, but it's good to see Mozilla kind of jumping on that. I think the big downside for us is, I mean, the companies that are in this are probably, they're probably, I don't know, 10, 15% of the kind of software we use, if it's that high. So all the vendors or most of the vendors that we have are not going to be in this. So I think there'll be some security by obscurity kind of a thing, but once they are able to actually, once they release the model, and then that will allow the bad actors access to the model because you're signing up for an account, right? It's hard. Any of these AI companies, it's hard for them to properly vet who is using the tool. So yeah, I just hope, I don't know. I hope our vendors, I think, are at the very least having the discussions because there's potentially a lot of vulnerabilities. Or even if it's not their particular software, it could be a situation like Log4j, right? Where it's a dependency. They don't, it's not their software per se, but there's 3 or 4 dependencies that use, and all of them have the vulnerabilities. So either way, I think there's kind of a reckoning, I guess, of some sort that's headed our way.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that we can shake out just really from all of that. 90 days from now, we're going to have a ton of patching to do. And the other thing, I guess, some people are wanting to give Anthropic, they're wanting to act like this is terrible. They're not doing the right thing. Like they really need regulated. When we just earlier talked about ISLE using open source models and claim to get some of the similar results. So I really don't think Anthropic can really hold us back because now that the cat's out of the bag, other companies, other entities are going to be trying to replicate this with other models.
Mhm.
So, really kudos to them. There's obviously Anthropic was in the news from pushing back, not wanting their models used for the Department of War in some instances. But with this, I really think they're doing the best with what they can. There's going to be people are going to be upset no matter what they do with something like this with Mythos. But I do think they're trying their best with this.
So we're going to really finish the episode talking about what we need to be doing in the time we have left before we assume these vulnerabilities are going to be released to the public. But before we do that, let's take a quick break. If you're enjoying this, make sure you're following us and make sure you have notifications turned on so that you never miss an episode or any of the content we put out. You can follow us wherever you're listening, whether that's audio or if you're watching us on video on YouTube. And if you want to connect to us between episodes, just follow us on social media, either the show page or individually. We'd love to hear from you. We also have an email. We'll talk about that at the very end. We'd love to hear feedback. We'd love to hear an episode idea from you. So just join the conversation wherever on that. And now, Anthony, let's get back to kind of how we're going to finish the episode, which is what do we got to do about this? I think we mentioned that nobody, not only our software vendors, but none of us. I'm Unfortunately, we're not part of Project Glasswing, so we're not going to be able to have like the inside scoop on exactly what's going on. But you kind of already alluded to a few things, and I think we can make some forecasting, right? And some things that we can do, even if we don't know the intricate details exactly. I think sometimes we talk about this, sometimes it can come kind of down to the basics. But just to kind of cap it all off, we know there's going to be a lot more vulnerabilities coming out, and we know that we're going to be asked to patch much more often. So understand that there's going to be some pressure coming. Some of these patches, some of these vulnerabilities could be to a level of criticality that we need to do it as soon as it comes out. Some of those we may have some more time on. Hard to say, but just understand that there are likely going to be many, many more vulnerabilities coming out of this. So, Anthony, kick us off. What's the first thing that we can do as we're waiting these results coming out of this project Glasswing and with this Mythos model?
Yeah, I would say the first one is this is a cybersecurity 101 is really just know what is on your network. If you don't know what you have, and how do you know what you're supposed to protect and what you're supposed to patch? So I would say that would be the top thing.
So something else we can do is start having a conversation with our vendors, especially maybe the critical vendors that we know are not part of this, maybe those ERP systems, things like that. Maybe reaching out to them and say, "Hey, what are you guys doing? Let's at least hope our vendors are creating their own plan, just like we should be." We need to probably go ahead and do that because those days will creep by pretty quickly. So if they get a lot of new vulnerabilities or new dependency vulnerabilities, like I mentioned, then like what are they going to do patch wise? Are they going to increase their patch schedule? So just working with them, they're our partners, right? We're supposed to work with them, try to figure out what we can do, how we can be prepared there.
The next item we would recommend is just prioritize what actually matters. Out of those 2,000 vulnerabilities, I sure hope that 1,500 of them were low or medium vulnerabilities, but you really just need to prioritize that. So if you got critical and you got high vulnerabilities, and are they internal and are they external? Obviously, any external facing vulnerability that gets a priority, and that would even change whether it's a lower medium. If it's external, you really want to take care of that. And then for those items that you can't patch, can you isolate them or can you mitigate them in some other way? That's things you need to look at.
I think another thing, and I'm going to kind of combine two here, Anthony, but I will say that just like you mentioned, we need to figure out what's most important. But no, I think we need to know ahead of time that we're not going to be able to patch everything right away. And potentially there's going to be things we cannot patch. for various reasons. Maybe the patch breaks a critical feature, or the vendor doesn't have access, or has not fixed it yet. So just don't get super disappointed if you can't do that. Make sure that you're doing things based on risk and what's riskier, and working your way through that. But just like everything, and especially I think considering that this AI model is going to be aware of these vulnerabilities and it's going to be available to access, is I think sometimes, and I know I'm not calling anyone out, but I think sometimes we often patch things and we do not test to be sure the patch actually fixed the thing. So make sure that we're verifying that patches are actually fixing the issue. So a lot of times when a patch comes out, there'll be a way to test that you're vulnerable, patch it, and then run the same test. I know sometimes it's easy to say, oh, well, the patch is there, it's good. But the patches are going to be coming out kind of fast and quick, and they might miss something. So just make sure when these come out that we are checking up on the vendors.
So as you mentioned with the patching, yeah, you can't patch everything, and along with that, you could burn out your staff. This is a marathon, this is not a sprint. If we know all these vulnerabilities are coming, maybe we want to slow down some of the non-essential work for the third quarter and really just make this a focus. Also, with this, it's nothing glamorous, and that's one of the things I like least, but work on your documentation, your policies, your governance, and also make sure your insurance is good and be aware of what your insurance policy covers. We actually just renewed our cybersecurity policy, but on top of that, you want to really make sure that the senior staff and maybe even the employees are aware of what's going on. That we're going to have this influx of vulnerabilities come in, and we're going to have a heavy focus on this patching. I do think just awareness is in your best interest. Just I would rather over communicate than under communicate.
And then lastly is, because we know we're not going to be able to patch everything on day one, we need to make sure the other controls we have in place, the kind of detective controls, for lack of a better word, are in place. That we have the EDR tools, the segmentation. Even if even if someone does use one of these vulnerabilities, are we able to detect it after they're in? We hope there's a patch very soon after the vulnerabilities are released, but in case there isn't, even if the vulnerability is used, we should be able to detect them after the fact. So just kind of give all of those a once over. Be sure you have that EDR tool on all your devices. I know we do. We have a process where we are constantly kind of looking for any EDR device, or various other tools we use that haven't reported in. So make sure you're on top of that. Make sure that you've got all those in place.
And as always, least privilege and zero trust, because
Mhm.
some of these vulnerabilities may get exploited. And if you're doing least privilege and zero trust, they're not going to be able to get a good foothold on your network and will be limited to basically where they get in at. So those are always things that you should always be focusing on at your organization. And now we're saying this is probably more important than ever.
Yeah. And I'm gonna throw one more on. I think when you mentioned it, it kind of jogged my memory. But I want to say your backups too. Make sure you have backups of all the critical things. Sometimes it's easy for a machine to just accidentally not get backed up or not put into a job. So make sure everything is backed up. So if you do have someone even if you figure out that they're in there, you can quickly restore, get them out of there, or so you don't have to deal with trying to manually remove them, whatever machine they may have compromised. So Anthony, pretty scary stuff, but we saw that there's some capability out there now. So maybe it's one of those things where it's like, now I think it's just bringing to light what's possible, maybe in a little better way, maybe a little more advanced than what's available. But I think it's probably bringing good awareness to what these AI models are going to be capable of now, and in the very near future. Any final thoughts you may have for those listening or watching?
Yeah, I really everyone, this is like, what else do we need next? Like another cybersecurity thing to worry about. I guess I'll just look at this as the glass is half full, but we should be thankful that this was discovered before it was released. That could have made things drastically worse. So I guess just I feel like we're very fortunate to know about this ahead of time. And I know a lot of people are like, what can we do? We just gave you some things to kind of focus on, and really just kind of thankful that we're aware of this before it actually come out, started getting exploited by bad actors.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. As we sign off here, of course, as I mentioned, we'd love to hear from you. Just shoot us an email, show it off the wire podcast, or reach out to us on social media if you have any feedback or ideas. Thanks for listening. And until next time, this is Off the Wire.
Thank you, everyone.